No! Don't touch him! You can't take him! He's too weak! The words ripped from Amelia's throat, raw and desperate, tasting of bile and fear. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the thin metal rail of the hospital crib, shielding the tiny, fragile body nestled inside. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room, usually a cold comfort, now felt like a spotlight on her utter, terrifying isolation. She knew how she looked, a disheveled, exhausted woman in cheap, ill-fitting scrubs, arguing with a pair of perfectly tailored, stone-faced security guards from the hospital administration. Before we continue, subscribe and comment where you're from. Miss Hayes, you are not the legal guardian. The first guard, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a sneer of contempt, stated for the 10th time. His voice was flat, bored, the sound of paperwork being processed over a human heart breaking. The bill has not been paid. The child's treatment has been suspended. He must be moved to a general ward, per policy. Suspended? He's barely breathing, she pleaded, her voice cracking, tears finally blurring the crisp white edges of the room. He has an infection. He needs this incubator. He needs the IV. Just give me a few more hours. I'll get the money. I just need to call his... I need to call someone. Lies. All lies. There was no one to call. There was no money. There had been no one but her. Not since the day she'd found the baby, barely a week old, abandoned in the freezing vestibule of the community center where she volunteered. A note had been pinned to his blanket. Just a name, Leo, and one whispered word of terror. Forgive me. That had been almost 6 months ago. 6 months of working 3 back-breaking jobs, of skipping her own meals, of pouring every single stolen dollar, every single drop of her own dwindling strength, into keeping this secret, beautiful burden alive. She felt the prick of the security guard's judgment, like a physical slap. He didn't believe her. No one ever did. Why would a woman like her, no job history, no savings, nothing but a battered wallet and a boundless, foolish heart, have a baby requiring private, specialized care? They saw a thief, a liar, a desperate nobody trying to game the system, and they weren't entirely wrong. She had sold everything: her grandmother's locket, her only pair of good shoes, the one silk scarf that had made her feel, just for a moment, like she wasn't completely invisible. And still, the hospital bill mocked her, a towering, insurmountable mountain of numbers. The guard sighed, the sound a deliberate theatrical display of his patience running out. We have given you 2 weeks, Miss Hayes. 2 weeks of grace. We can't run a hospital on good intentions. He took a step toward the crib. Stand aside. No. She pressed herself against the cold metal, a shield of bone and thin fabric. She knew what moving Leo would mean. They'd take out the specialized IV drip, the antibiotic treatment would cease, and he would be put on a waiting list for the overcrowded pediatric ward. By the time they got to him, it would be too late. His tiny, struggling lungs were already fighting a losing battle. A sudden, sharp memory cut through her fear, a jagged shard of her past. She saw her ex-boyfriend, Marcus, leaning over her just 3 months ago, his face a mask of patronizing disgust. You're really going to keep that thing, Amelia? That unpaid-for problem? You'll ruin your life, ruin yourself for a child that isn't even yours. You're a fool, always helping strays. He'd walked out that day, taking the last shred of her dignity, and the small, promised loan she'd been depending on. Marcus, who had always hated her soft edges, her inability to turn away from pain. His words now echoed in the guard's flat stare. Fool, stray, problem. Her cheeks burned, not just with the shame of her poverty, but with the humiliation of being seen, really seen, as worthless, as a failed protector. She squeezed her eyes shut, a brief, silent prayer that was less about a miracle and more about just having the strength not to crumble right there on the synthetic hospital floor. Please, God, just let me be strong enough for him, just this once. The second guard, a larger man with heavy shoulders, placed a hand on her arm. It wasn't a comforting touch, it was an enforcement. You're making this difficult. Let go of the rail, or we will have to escort you out. Amelia opened her mouth to scream, to protest, to beg, but the sound caught, a strangled gasp in her throat. She saw Leo's little face, contorted in a silent, pained grimace, his chest rising and falling too quickly. He was getting worse, and she was wasting time fighting a battle she couldn't win. They were going to take him. She had failed. The weight of it all, the relentless bills, the lonely nights, the betrayal, the constant gnawing fear finally broke her. Her head bowed, her body shaking with silent, exhausted sobs. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible, a ragged, dying plea. "Just, please, he's all I have left." And then a sound. It was not the clatter of a food tray, or the distant drone of a hospital intercom. It was a thud, deep and resonant. A sound of heavy, expensive leather shoes, striking linoleum. It was the sound of something utterly out of place, utterly commanding, utterly powerful. The air in the small, clinical room shifted, dense and immediate, as if the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with something far more charged, far more dangerous. The security guard's heavy hand instantly lifted from her arm. She didn't have to look up to know they were reacting to a presence, a force majeure that dwarfed their minor authority. Their contemptuous faces had gone slack, replaced by an expression of strained professionalism that bordered on pure, naked fear. Amelia slowly raised her head, her tear-stained eyes blinking away the last of the despair. He stood in the doorway. He didn't walk in, he simply filled the space. He was a study in dangerous contrasts. His suit was a midnight black expanse of Italian wool, sharp and utterly flawless, contrasting brutally with the sterile white walls. His tie was silk, the color of a stormy sea, knotted with lethal precision. But it was his face that stole the breath Amelia had left to draw. Sculpted cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that were the color of cold, polished granite. They were ruthless eyes, eyes that had seen things, ordered things, and executed things Amelia couldn't even begin to imagine. They were eyes that held a kingdom of silent power. He didn't look at the guards. He didn't look at Amelia. His gaze, laser-focused, went straight to the crib, to the tiny, fragile being tucked beneath the blankets, struggling for life, and in that moment, the ruthless precision of his face cracked, just for a split second, revealing a flicker of something ancient, something protective, something that looked terrifyingly like pain. The first security guard swallowed hard, his voice suddenly small and reedy. "Sir, I apologize, this room is restricted. We were just handling The man in black raised one hand. A minute, almost invisible gesture. It was all it took. The guard's voice died in his throat, a pathetic squeak. The man stepped fully into the room. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and deliberate. He paused next to the crib, the sheer scale of his power, making the tiny incubator seem even more fragile. He looked down at the baby, and then he looked at the IV lines, the monitors, the numbers flashing in crimson. He didn't touch the baby, but the air around him hummed with an almost painful intensity of possession. Then, his granite eyes lifted and finally landed on Amelia. He took in her tear-streaked face, her desperation, the defiant way she was still clinging to the rail, her bruised spirit laid bare. There was no sneer in his look, no contempt, only a profound icy stillness that was somehow worse. It felt like being assessed by a geological force, cold, immense, and ultimately unconcerned with her survival. His gaze flicked back to the security guards. His voice, when it came, was not a shout or a snarl. It was a low, velvet rumble, thick with authority, a sound that bypassed the ear and resonated directly in the chest. "You were moving, my son." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, a lethal pronouncement. The security guards' faces went from pale to ashen. The first one stammered, his professionalism dissolving into fear. "Sir, the payment, there was an issue with the account. A misunderstanding, sir. We were simply following protocol. Miss Hayes here." The Mafia boss, for that was what he had to be. The sheer aura of untouchable extra-legal power confirmed it, cut him off with a shift of his shoulder. He turned his attention back to Amelia, and now, for the first time, he spoke directly to her. His eyes searched hers, demanding, calculating. But beneath the ice, there was a flicker of something she couldn't name. Suspicion? Curiosity? "The child is mine," he said again, his voice possessing the room. possessing the very air she breathed. He didn't ask her a question, he made a claim, and then he added the chilling words that shattered her secret world entirely, pulling the video title's dark promise into brutal reality. He's mine. He took one more look at the baby, a look of fierce, devastating tenderness that was instantly hidden again, and then he turned his full, terrifying attention to the guard, his voice dropping to a near whisper that still managed to sound louder than a shout. You said there was an issue with payment. You attempted to remove a critically ill infant from the care unit because of a monetary technicality. The guard was practically shaking. Sir, the account was flagged by the administration. I asked a question, the boss interrupted, his tone dangerously patient. Was the issue due to the amount owed, or the lack of payment? The lack of payment, sir, from Miss Hayes. The bills have been outstanding for some time. The Mafia boss reached a hand into the inner pocket of his coat. He didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a sleek, black leather clip, thick with $100 bills, easily more money than Amelia had seen in her entire life. He didn't count it. He simply flipped the entire wad, easily $10,000, onto the guard's chest. The money scattered, fluttering to the floor like discarded autumn leaves. The amount is irrelevant, he stated, his face utterly devoid of expression. My son is a Rossi. The next time a payment is late, I suggest you call me, not the security team. His eyes narrowed, and the warmth in the room dropped 10 degrees. And should you ever touch him, or the woman who protected him, again, I will own this hospital and fire everyone you have ever cared about. The guard's pale face crumpled with fear. Understood, sir. Absolutely, sir. There was no harm intended, sir. We apologize. We will ensure the immediate continuance of his full treatment. The boss simply nodded, a dismissal colder than ice. The guards scrambled to collect the scattered bills, a final, humiliating act of deference, and bolted from the room, their heavy footsteps receding into the distant hospital corridor. The silence that returned was suffocating, heavy with the weight of unspent violence and the shock of this impossible reality. It was just Amelia, the fragile crib, and the man who was Leo's father, the notorious Dante Rossi. Amelia finally let go of the crib rail. Her legs felt weak, like rubber, and she took a stumbling step back. Her mind was a dizzying kaleidoscope of panic and disbelief. This was the moment of total humiliation, the moment where her desperate, lonely lie was exposed to the one person who mattered. She braced herself for the contempt, the rage, the inevitable accusation of kidnapping or extortion. She looked at him and found his granite eyes already fixed on her. They were calmer now, the threat having receded, replaced by a devastating, slow scrutiny. You took care of him, Dante said, his voice softer, but still commanding. It wasn't a thank you. It was a finding. Amelia's chin trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. She would not let him see her completely break. He was abandoned, she whispered, her voice still rough from crying. I found him. He was barely a week old. He was freezing, and he was sick. I brought him here and I lied to keep him here. I told them I was his mother, and then I just kept working. I couldn't let him die. She expected him to mock her foolishness, her pauper's heroism. Instead, his dark eyes held hers, unwavering. You knew who his father was. It wasn't an accusation. It was a test. She shook her head, tears starting anew. No, I only knew the note said Leo. I knew nothing else. Not until the doctors showed me his blood work, his rare type, and they said he must belong to someone powerful, someone connected. She choked on the last word. I was terrified. I was afraid they would take him and you would think I stole him. A slow, almost imperceptible muscle twitched in his jaw. He finally took a step closer, not toward her, but toward the crib. He looked down at Leo, his head tilted slightly, his face softening with a tenderness that was so deep, so unexpected, it punched the air from Amelia's lungs. He reached out a large, powerful finger, and gently, unbelievably, traced the curve of the baby's tiny, frail hand. He has my eyes, Dante murmured, the words for himself, a profound realization that was both devastating and beautiful. The doctor told me about his condition. He said he has been struggling for months. You were paying for a private incubator. You were paying for the best care. He turned back to Amelia, the granite eyes now holding a spark of true curiosity. Why? Why risk everything, lie to everyone, work yourself to exhaustion for a child you found, a child that wasn't yours? Amelia closed her eyes, letting the memory of her own abandonment rush over her. Her mother leaving her on the doorstep of a distant, indifferent aunt at the age of 10, her whole world crumbling into silence. The humiliation of being the poor relation, the unwanted baggage. Because I know what it's like, she whispered, her voice barely a thread. I know what it's like to be small, and alone, and fighting to breathe, to feel like the world has decided you're a problem, a thing that can be discarded. I couldn't let that happen to him. Not when I had a choice. She opened her eyes, and now, despite her fear, there was defiance. I didn't do it for money. I didn't even do it for you. I did it because he needed me, and I was all he had. Dante Rossi simply stared at her. He wasn't evaluating her for a job, or for a threat. He was evaluating her soul. He saw the faded marks of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the poverty stitched into her clothes, the raw, unpolished honesty burning in her gaze. He saw the woman who had stood between his son and the cold, unfeeling bureaucracy of the world. A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was a cold, wolfish expression, yet it contained a strange heat. You have courage, Amelia Hayes. A kind of foolish, reckless courage I haven't seen in years. He paused, his eyes sweeping over her again, lingering on the spot where the guard had touched her arm. The doctor on call told me you've been sleeping in the chair by his side for days. They tried to send you home. You refused. He cries when he's alone. She explained simply. He knows my voice. If you've ever wished someone strong would step in when no one else would, someone powerful enough to stop the world from crushing you when you're at your most vulnerable, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel now. You're about to see what happens when true power meets true goodness, and the cost of the forbidden love it ignites. Dante turned away from the crib, the atmosphere instantly shifting from fragile vulnerability to an intense, contained threat. He walked to the window, gazing out at the dark, indifferent city skyline. The silence stretched between them, thick and fraught, punctuated only by the rhythmic beep 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 of the life support machines. The lie stops now, he said, his voice flat and final. You will tell the hospital staff the truth, that you are his nanny, hired by me, and that this was a temporary lapse in communication, swiftly corrected. He turned back, his gaze pinning her to the wall. You will be compensated for your time, generously, and then you will go back to your life. The sudden dismissal was like a fresh wave of ice water. Her brief, desperate moment of connection with him, the shared concern over Leo, vanished. He was paying her off, erasing her existence, shutting the door back to the loneliness she had just escaped. A strange, unexpected surge of anger mixed with her fear. Go back to what life, Mr. Rossi? The life where I have no money, and everyone thinks I'm a thief. The life where I have no family, and no one to care if I live or die. The life where I spend every waking second, terrified that I won't be able to pay the next bill? Her voice was rising, raw with months of suppressed anxiety. I don't want your money. I want to stay here. Leo needs me. You've been gone for 6 months. He knows me. He doesn't know you. The air crackled. She had dared to challenge a Rossi. She had dared to speak of his absence. He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately, a predator closing the distance. She tried to hold her ground, but her survival instinct was screaming at her to run. When he stopped, he was so close she could smell the clean, expensive scent of his cologne, a hint of dark wood, and something sharp, like a whisper of danger. He was overwhelmingly tall, overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly Mafia. You are right, he stated, his voice a low, intimate growl that vibrated in the air between them. I was gone. I was in Sicily, handling an extended family matter. I was unaware of the child's existence until this morning. The mother, he paused, and his eyes darkened with a cold, terrifying anger, did not inform me. She left the note you described, and then she vanished, a calculated move to ensure his safety and anonymity. My enemies are thorough. He was telling her a secret, a deep, dangerous family secret. She protected him by leaving him where I wouldn't immediately find him. he continued, a note of cold respect in his voice. And you, Amelia Hayes, protected him by giving him a voice in this sterile place. You are not going back to your old life. Amelia blinked, completely lost. I don't understand. He reached out a hand, and this time, he did touch her. His long, strong fingers gently brushed the tears dried on her cheek, a touch that was both possessive and utterly tender, a paradox that stole her breath. You said he knows your voice. You said he needs you, he murmured, his thumb stroking her skin. The shock of the contact was electric, a forbidden current arcing between them. I am a ruthless man, Amelia. I have enemies everywhere. My life is a constant war. My son cannot be left with strangers, and you are no longer a stranger. He was offering her a deal, a dark, terrifying, beautiful deal. I am offering you a new life, he said, his voice sinking to a dangerous whisper. You will live in my home. You will be his exclusive caregiver. You will be under my protection. You will be paid more than you could earn in 10 lifetimes, but you will leave your old world completely behind. You will not talk to anyone about this. You will be loyal only to me, and to Leo. The danger was intoxicating. The thought of safety, true, absolute, ironclad safety, was a siren song she couldn't resist. But the cost, and what will I be to you? She whispered, the question burning on her tongue. His eyes, full of shadow and depth, dropped to her mouth. The attraction was a physical thing, a crushing weight of need that she could feel in her bones. She was terrified, but she also wanted him to pull her closer, to erase the months of loneliness and humiliation in his strong, dangerous arms. You will be the only other soul allowed to be near my son, he said, his voice flatly possessive. And you will be the one woman I have ever met who risked everything for a human life, who was poor and yet rich in courage. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, and the whisper he delivered was a vow, a threat, and a promise, all in one. You will be mine to protect. The arrangement is non-negotiable. Do you understand? He pulled back, his powerful hands resting lightly on her shoulders, holding her gaze. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach, but it was now laced with an unbearable, forbidden excitement. She looked past him to the crib, to the small, fragile bundle whose life she had saved, the one who had brought this terrifying, beautiful storm into her world. Yes, she breathed, the word a soft surrender, a dangerous acceptance of her new, shadowed fate. I understand. The next few days were a blur of transformation. Dante Rossi was a man who moved mountains with a simple phone call. Leo's private room was upgraded again. Amelia's hospital bill was not just paid. The hospital administrator came to the room, practically bowing, offering a lifetime of free treatment. Dante brought her new clothes, expensive soft fabrics that felt alien but wonderful against her skin. He didn't stay with her. He kept a professional distance, but his men were always outside the door, silent, watchful ghosts. She saw his rivals, slick, dangerous men in ill-fitting suits, attempting to look inconspicuous, being discreetly intercepted in the corridors, their purpose thwarted before they could even step on the ward. The danger was still circling, thick and palpable, but now she was inside the eye of the storm, protected by the most ruthless force in the city. She saw Dante every evening. He would arrive after dark, his coat smelling of the cold night air, and a hint of fine tobacco. He wouldn't talk business. He would sit in the chair she used to occupy, watching Leo. He was silent, introspective, the only time his guard ever seemed to drop. One evening, Amelia was changing Leo's diaper when Dante walked in. She was tired, her hair was a mess, and the baby was fussing. She felt the familiar sting of self-consciousness, the poverty-stricken woman dealing with a messy, ordinary task in front of the man who commanded empires. I can do that, she murmured, trying to pull the blanket higher to hide her clumsiness. Dante walked over, his dark gaze fixed on the baby, completely ignoring her attempt to hide. He watched her gentle, practiced movements. You're good with him, he stated. Not a compliment, just a simple observation. I've had practice, she said, her voice dry. You were mocked, he said suddenly, his voice quiet. By the guards, by the doctors. They saw your struggle and judged you for it. Amelia tensed. She didn't want to talk about the shame. It's fine. It's in the past. No, he said, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart pound. It's not. I heard the recordings. Every hospital room is monitored. I wanted to hear how he was treated in my absence. He paused, his gaze burning into hers. They called you worthless. They laughed at your clothes. They said you were a fool who would never succeed. They humiliated you in front of my son. Amelia looked away, her cheeks burning hot. The wound was ripped open. Why are you telling me this? He reached out and gently took the fresh diaper from her hand, his thumb brushing hers. She shivered at the deliberate contact. He didn't finish the task. He just held the diaper, an anchor between their two worlds. I am telling you this, so you understand what is about to happen, he said, his voice dangerously low. From this moment, anyone who has ever spoken a cruel word to you, anyone who has ever dismissed your heart, anyone who has ever seen you as weak or worthless, will answer to me. He slowly raised his eyes from their linked hands to her face. The look in his eyes was no longer cool granite. It was a dark, molten sea, full of possessiveness, and a terrifying protective fire. You are no longer Amelia Hayes, the struggling volunteer. You are part of my family, my woman, my son's mother figure. He moved closer, caging her between his body and the crib, his scent filling her senses. When we leave this hospital, you will walk out on my arm. Every eye will be on you. Every enemy will know you are mine. He leaned down, his breath warm against her ear, and his voice dropped to the most intimate, raw whisper, a sound that bypassed her fear and went straight to her deepest, most hidden desires. From this moment, no one touches you. You're mine,